Cut up the past and the future leaks out.
I always had the suspicion of this idea that there's the good stuff and the bad stuff. I don't think it's like that. I think being decent is a process that's hard. It's like doing science or working in technology. You have to get results. You don't necessarily know what'll work.
Cut up the past and the future leaks out. The art of literally cutting up text and images in random fashion and then reassembling them to form a new and unexpected patterns.
I resonate with what you were saying about how program or be programmed, which obviously is a theme we've heard before, but it made me think of, everything you do, absolutely everything you do in your existence creates some level of entropy that influences your environment. So every thought, every bit of energy, every action that you perform, everything that you're involved with, even if in your eyes, on your scale, you don't see it affecting a lot, maybe your piece of art has 40 viewers, but one of those 40 viewers, you've triggered something in their mind that's made them create something that maybe is seen by thousands of people. And then within those thousands of people, it triggers something in those people, and they, these actions trigger other things in people, and it's cumulative entropy that actually pushes these ideas, these vibes, these energies forward out onto the world to create these new things, to actually change things.
Cut up the past and the future leaks out. The art of literally cutting up text and images in random fashion and then reassembling them to form a new and unexpected patterns. By doing so, one can destabilize language, perception, and reality and get closer to the truth.
I felt so lonely. I felt like just a kind of deep black loneliness, and part of how I found my way out of it was with these fantasies of ways to reach across to other people's hidden minds that were hidden inside these funny sacks of skin, these heads, and
You have entered the mind's underground.
I wonder, will potentially a well-written white paper in the crypto draw our community in, especially with Facebook banning the speech of crypto? It seems like it might just be a natural reunion. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I missed that last part there.
With the white paper for the Minds coin coming out, if we can get it some legitimacy, I wonder with Facebook dropping off, allowing posts about cryptocurrency, if that will be the full circle that we need to draw the important pieces back to our platform and have that sort of cohesive era, maybe a new renaissance of some of the original players from before.
Has Facebook really dropped off any discussion of crypto? Because that's very interesting. I know there's a lot of people that talk about Bitcoin, but you're right, I don't see a lot of discussion about blockchain technologies or anything else occurring on there. And I think educating people about the technologies behind these cryptocurrencies that they're so unfamiliar with and confused about is another really important piece of the puzzle. I've been trying to spread like very, very basic fundamentals out there so that people can start to understand things on their level instead of someone trying to come at them with hundreds of concepts that they've never heard of and might not understand that are overwhelming. And I think the more people that start to understand these technologies and understand what we're trying to do at a very basic level in layman's terms, the more they'll start to rally behind us and understand what the fight actually is. It's not a bunch of, as the media would like to portray it, a bunch of misfits spewing out hate speech, hiding off in the corners of the internet because they've been banned from all these other platforms for breaking the rules. It's because we're trying to liberate free speech and actually create disruptive technologies to prevent unethical censorship around the internet. So getting things to people on a level that they can understand and not just assuming that everyone is the smartest person in the room without being pretentious about it, without treating them like a child, to actually just sort of try and explain things with different small scale models and very small metaphors that make sense to them will get a lot of people moving in this direction.
The aim is to present new ideas to you all by providing contact with the people who are closest to the source of the advances and shifts in thoughts that reshape our notion of the way in which the universe works.
Do you feel that compared to the conversations you were having in Silicon Valley in the 70s and the 80s, have we lost a conceptual spiritual ambition? Have we become more technocratic and lost this idea that there can be these radical transformations in human existence? And if so, is that a bad thing?
Yeah, well, that is the question, actually. I'm haunted by that question. I do think that there was a certain utopian spirit that got subsumed maybe by corporate marketing in Silicon Valley, where these days when you hear something's going to change the world, you just dismiss it because it's just the latest, Silicon Valley cloud thing. It's said all the time and it doesn't mean anything anymore. And your question about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a hard one to answer. As I was saying before, I'm really suspicious of utopian thinking, even though when I was younger, I was a pretty good channel for it at times. I think it's probably some sort of a question of balance. I think a little bit of it, especially when you're young, is a good thing. I think it's important not to take too much of the world as given. But what I flash on when you ask that question is how Steve Bannon adopted the language of sort of the left intellectuals of the same period about deconstruction. And this idea that the whole world we've been given is corrupt and must be destroyed. And then as soon as we destroy the bad things, the bad thoughts and the bad people, then everything will be great. It's the same fallacy I was talking about before. I mean, that's the danger in utopian thinking, is that it can turn you into a pointless vandal very, very easily. I think the more useful thinking is to think of betterment as a project that's a challenge, rather than just think of the world as being annoying because we just have to get rid of the bad people and everything will be okay. If you can have just enough of utopian feeling that you do question the world as it is and imagine how it could be better, I think that's a wonderful thing. But if you take it too far, you actually undermine yourself. So I would say like a homeopathic utopianism I will support.
Cut up the past and the future leaks out. The art of literally cutting up text and images in random fashion and then reassembling them to form a new and unexpected patterns. By doing so, one can destabilize language, perception, and reality, and get closer to the truth. You have entered the mind's underground.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to that whole thing. Cory Doctorow was, I think it was a Bioneers lecture he did. But anyways, that deficit in communication, that deficit in storytelling, the deficit of symbols and icons that we use. And I think, even Douglas Rushkoff,
when human beings acquired language, we didn't just learn to listen, we learned how to speak. When human beings acquired text, we learned not just how to read, but how to write. And now that we acquire computers, we should learn not just how to use them, but how to program. Back in the 1980s, learning to use a computer was the same thing as learning to program one. But as computers got easier to use and more user-friendly, the distance between using a computer and knowing how it worked got longer and wider until we had extremely opaque interfaces through which you do what the program says without any idea of what's actually going on behind the screen. Ask any kid what Facebook is for, and he'll tell you, well, Facebook is here to help me make friends. No, they're looking to figure out how to monetize people's relationships. If you don't know what the software you're using is for, then you're not using it, but being used by it. Back when I first got on the internet, I saw networking as the next great leap in human evolution, that we were moving towards a new networked organism. And I'm amazed at how few of us have actually decided to participate in this project. In a digital age, or in any age for that matter, whoever holds the keys to programming ends up building the reality in which the rest of us live. Thanks to these technologies, we now have the ability to remake our economy, our education, our government, even our religions. If we don't seize the opportunity to remake our world, I promise you someone or something else will do it for us.
Is kind of on that same progression. Not too long ago, he felt it was his need to write all these books and to have these academic dissertations to explain why our underlining economic structure of corporate capitalism is inherently poisonous to humanity and society, and these kind of archaic, we're running off of like 19th century economic software, and that we kind of give it as a given thing of nature, but it's something that we manufacture, and this whole thing about program or reprogrammed. And so, he became a professor, and he was doing all this stuff, and then now that he's kind of thinking, okay, I've done all this work, and before there wasn't people talking about this kind of stuff, and you see it too, the progression of the narrative of the whole underlying movement of the digital underground, and how that's where the society has always progressed from the edges in. And that was kind of funny when I was talking to Are You Serious about Mondo 2000, and he kind of coined this kind of phrase, the new edge. Instead of the whole thing was about people new age, but he was like the new edge and blending psychedelics with the latest developments in technology. This is the early 90s, late 80s, and really, when I look back at what they were doing then, whether it's Rushkoff, Siberia, Mondo 2000, Techno-Gnosticism by Eric Davis, Mark Pesce, and his techno-paganism, like these guys were dreaming up the dream, and somewhere along the way,
everybody is really so busy writing about what is technology doing to us? What is digital technology doing to us? What is Google doing to us? And I so don't care about what technology is doing to us. I care about what are we doing to one another through technology. Right? Technology is not doing anything to you. Right? It's people that are doing things to you, at least for the time being. Right? Because these things, believe it or not, that they're made by people in rooms. They make the code. These are human creation. So because people can't or won't learn programming, because they won't take 2 weeks and learn Scratch, right? Because they won't do Lego Mindstorms because they think it's too much of a mathematical challenge, because they've forgotten long division and don't want to be reminded that they don't know what an algorithm is, we aren't going to teach this generation, the next generation, or probably the next generation how to program as a basic literacy skill. It took human beings 2,000 years to decide to learn the 22-letter alphabet, right? It was elites, it was rabbis and priests and kings who knew how to do that, even though, what does it take? It takes your kindergarten year to learn what that alphabet is, and then you can read. It took people a long time to get that. It'll take them a long time to get this too. I look at the invention of language, terrific thing. But people didn't just learn how to listen, they learned how to speak, right? Look at the invention of text. People didn't learn just how to read, they learned how to write. And now we get the invention of digital technologies, and people learn how to use them, but not how to program them. As if, and this is the argument they make, as if, well, I can drive a car, but I don't know how to fix the engine. As if the relationship between the user and programmer of a piece of technology was that of a driver and an auto mechanic. But it's not the relationship of a driver and an auto mechanic, it's the relationship of the driver and the passenger. Right? I'm not asking that people know how to open up their computers and replace the power supply or fix the screen luminescence. I'm asking that they understand how to use the machine. To use a computer is to program. And I think that's That's, to me, is the important question. This is as big as text, and things will arise from this as big as Judeo-Christianity, as big as the industrial age, as big as centralized currency. We are on the edge of something so potentially great. It could make it so we don't all die in the next couple of centuries. It really could. We could flip this thing, and I think people need to get that.
And I was just thinking about this somewhere, there's always this point of any development of anything where it's the potential of it, and Are You Serious was kind of talking about this, is like, that moment before it actually becomes something. A lot of times in your imagination or in your head, it's a lot fuller and a lot better, but that artwork of trying to explain it. But going back to that thing where Douglas started to see is that other people were talking about similar things. Other people were talking about the perils of the algorithms. Mainstream journalism's this Frank Fuller of, I think, the New York Times wrote The Big Three's Existential Threat to Humanity or something like that, and talking about Google, Facebook, and Apple, of how they want to be that one ring to rule them all, and their desperate threats to try to control everything, and the adverse effects that it has, that not being aware about certain things. It's kind of like that Wizard of Oz thing, right? As long as you don't look behind the curtain, you're in all of this projection of things, and then when you look, you're like, oh, that's all it is. So what he finally came to, which I think I've always kind of been on, is that what really it needs to be, what Govspiders is talking about, is how do we communicate certain things so they can be heard. And it always goes back to what I was saying, what I altered of Kennedy. If more politicians knew poetry and more poets knew politics, I'm convinced the world would be a lot better place. But I kind of branched it out to more programmers knew poetry and more poets knew programming. I'm convinced the world would be a lot better place. And I think that's the thing, right? We have people that are really good at conjuring up perceptual spells, I mean, all marketing is these advanced techniques to communicate information to people. And I was my old joke is like, these people have access to the best technology and the best software and the whole data of all humanity, and their biggest dream is how they're gonna sell my grandma tube socks. Like, that's what they're using it for. That's their grand scheme of things. Like, surely we could dream up a better dream than that. But
selling my grandma tube socks.
Yeah.
No, but you said teaching programmers poetry. Maybe we just need more programmers doing psychedelics. But no, I kind of I resonate with what you were saying about how program or be programmed, which obviously is a theme we've heard before, but it made me think of, everything you do, absolutely everything you do in your existence creates some level of entropy that influences your environment. So every thought, every bit of energy, every action that you perform, everything that you're involved with, even if in your eyes, on your scale, you don't see it affecting a lot, maybe your piece of art has 40 viewers, but one of those 40 viewers, you've triggered something in their mind that's made them create something that maybe is seen by thousands of people. And then within those thousands of people, it triggers something in those people, and they, these actions trigger other things in people, and it's cumulative entropy that actually pushes these ideas, these vibes, these energies forward out onto the world to create these new things, to actually change things. And I think that's very significant to think about, especially as a source of self-encouragement.
As far as the amount of work and stuff that I've done of my own stuff, and it was never with the intent like, oh, I'm going to have 1,000 viewers on YouTube. But it's so funny. I always, and this is part of the reason maybe why we are led by the least among us. That just as an example, you take what was her name? The Woe Revolution. I forgot what her original handle was. But anyways, she was constantly spamming everybody and constantly sending out her message. And then when you look a little deeper about what is exactly her message was nothing. Her message was just to get out there. And this kind of goes into this whole thing that we have always kind of a little bit talked about. And I think goes into what Govspiders kind of alluded to. And I feel it all the time, that the new wave of people on Minds, and you know, there's no judgment or whatever, but just my observations of it. They were conditioned for how you go viral on YouTube and how you go viral on Facebook and how you go viral on Twitter, because of the algorithms, whether they realize it or not, is to be shocking, to grab that attention. It doesn't matter what you're saying as long as you make a distraction, as long as you grab that attention and it has a ripple effect, and then someone gets outraged, and then there's a battle in the comments, and then all of a sudden that video gets 1,000 views and 100 likes, and then all of a sudden you get all these subscribers, and then there's tons of YouTubers, especially the ones that I look into a little bit, that moved on to Minds, started off reviewing computers, and then all of a sudden they figured out that they're getting more views when they become a little bit political, and then they started doing a little bit more, and then started doing a little more, until the whole channel is like that. And the original intent was to review computers, or they're just gaming and talking shit, and then they found out if they said something a little bit racist, or they said something that would offend the SJWs or whatever, and then all of a sudden now they got like a million views, and then they're like, okay, so it's like a stick, but then after a while you're playing this role, and then you get lost in that role, I think. And this kind of goes into like anything, just a matter of your own psychology. And I think this is something you learn if you get really into meditation or psychedelics. And I was kind of talking about this to a long lost friend that I met up last night. That's why I stood up all night. And I was talking about this article that I read by Rick Straussman, who wrote DMT, the spirit molecule, who's only doctor in the last decade to actually be able to do research on DMT. And he wrote DMT, the spirit molecule, and most people probably know the documentary. But anyways, his latest article is about how psychedelics are super placebos. And thinking further about this, and is just kind of by coincidence or synchronicity, that I was listening to this other podcast, and in it, Charles Epstein was talking about how we don't even really fully understand the placebo effect. And I was thinking, all of perception is a placebo effect. Like, our perception is kind of in this kind of extreme version of it, of what I was thinking in my pushing my thoughts to the edge, was that all of our experience, our perception of what reality is a placebo / psychedelic projection. Yeah, that I was telling my friend when she was saying about, what's so bad about this and that, and she's like, I kind of see this reflected into my news feed on Minds. Well, I was like, Minds doesn't have an algorithm like Facebook has an algorithm, and I know that for a fact. It's like, but this is kind of how perception works in your everyday life. If you're in a good mood, right? The birds are chirping, you see the sun rays, everything goes your way. But when you're sad, you're feeling blue, you notice the clouds, you stub your toe, you drop your papers, your food is too hot, or it gets overcooked, or whatever. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. It's funny how your mood kind of sets this domino effect of how you perceive the world. And I'm always fascinated when I've read Robert Anton Wilson and Bret Easton Allen. He had this one book, The Rules of Attraction, and in the book, the opening scene is told from 4 people of the same exact party, and they're all slightly different, depending on the perception of that party. But there's certain words that are emphasized or that gets curated to instead of it being bad, it was horrible, or different slight things like that, right? Their interpretation of what that person said. They might have said, oh, that's bad. But in their mind, it was like, that was horrible, you shit fucker, mother, And then it just clouds their whole judgment of that perception. And so this kind of goes even further more back to that thing I was talking about, the last days of reality. Like, we all do this naturally with our perceptions. This is a natural state. And it's funny how, we're building these algorithms, whether knowingly or not, AI technology in our own image. And I was remembering she was saying something about, isn't it just all part of evolution? Yeah, kind of, but we're gonna be stalled if we not gonna really be able to create a true AI, or if we don't even understand how our own mind works. And even going further of how perception actually works, or how reality actually works. And in the Zen practice, there's two ways to enlightenment. There's the outside, where you like rake sand, or you do these different tasks, or someone hits you with a stick, or it's the inner, and you just sit silent and you wait in the tree of knowledge, and then all of a sudden you realize, boom, you get to that point. That's Satori. In this way of us, a society, we're going so far outside ourselves, looking at we're destroying the environment, we're looking towards devices. And I think in a very kind of ironic twist to our story, that the more we go further outside with all these distractions, that it's going to inevitably lead back to what it's all about, what it always has been about. And that is just that thing that I've always said is, the main thing in the universe is nameless, so I give it beauty. Now, beauty is beauty, that's all there is to it. If you're interested in yourself, then you're stuck with yourself, and you're stuck with your death. But if you get interested in beauty, then you launch onto something mysterious inside your soul that grows and grows like a secret insane thought until you're it. And I love saying that because I'm always reminding myself of that.
Always been the one, closed shutters with the stutter, overthinking thoughts, mind muddled with the clutter. I've been pleasing peers for years, backseat dreams become the martyr, idle chances passing by, watching black become the tartar, recognizing all these things that I thought I'd never done, excelling in my mind, obligations that I shun. When I think of what I want, the dedication that it takes, I practice what I preach, disregarding past mistakes, chase ahead over my head, and I take a deep breath, recognize time and its unrepentant theft, pick up positivity and use it on my quest. I'm coming for your future, best be geared up in a vest, cause it's solitude shows us who we are. Move at light speed, choose and aim for a star. You know you'll have regrets if you submit subpar, so be you.
And we'll express ourselves, and with this, other people won't feel so alone.